Well, as the world battles the highly infectious COVID-19 Delta variant, governments are looking at an increased price tag for their most formidable weapon. According to the Financial Times, vaccine manufacturers Pfizer and Moderna have pumped up the prices for their sought-after vaccines under their new supply agreements with the European Union. While richer countries should be able to absorb the increase, it could be devastating for poorer nations, which are already struggling to procure enough doses. According to the Financial Times, under the new EU contract, Pfizer will raise the price of its COVID-19 vaccine by more than 25% to $23 a dose. Last week, the drug manufacturer increased its sales forecast for the vaccines to $33.5 billion this year, with revenue expected to hit $55 billion in 2023. The EU has reportedly agreed to pay Moderna $25.50 per dose, which is up from about $22 in the first procurement deal. That's still lower than the previously agreed amount of $28.50 due to a growth in demand. AstraZeneca, which wasn't included in the EU's latest supply agreements, sells its vaccines to emerging economies for around $5 a shot. Despite the low cost, the price is still out of the reach for many low and middle income countries. Okay, let's get more on this issue now with Max Lawson, who's the Head of Inequality Policy at Oxfam. He joins us now from London. Really good to have you on the program, Max. Now, I'm wondering if I can get your thoughts on the reports from the Financial Times that Pfizer and Moderna are really looking to increase their prices, at least for the EU. Many would argue that the nations within the EU can afford to pay for those doses, but are you worried about a potential flow-on effect that perhaps poorer nations may also be impacted by these price hikes?
We think this is a case of profiteering. These companies, Pfizer, Moderna, they have a monopoly on these successful vaccines, a monopoly that was granted to them by the US government, by the German government. And these vaccines were funded with public money. So these companies are making monopoly prices. The world is desperate for these vaccines. And what we're saying for is we need to get rid of these monopolies. We need to open up the vaccine recipes, get rid of the vaccine patents, enable producers all over the world to manufacture these life-saving vaccines, which are incredibly cheap to produce. Studies by Imperial College have shown that the Pfizer vaccine costs as little as $1.20 to produce, and they're selling it, as we heard today, to the EU for $25. That's not a decent profit. That's a criminal level of profit when the world desperately needs these vaccines.
Yes, and in the lead up to the release of this Financial Times report, the People's Vaccine Alliance, of which Oxfam is a member, actually released a study of your own. You've called it the Great Vaccine Robbery, and one of the really startling findings that I came across was that you estimate that Pfizer and Moderna are charging as much as $41 billion above the estimated cost of production. We do acknowledge that pharmaceutical companies need to turn a profit, but in your view, is this an extreme profit that, in fact, they are profiteering, as you say?
I think it's an extreme profit. I think obviously, all companies need to make money, they need to cover their costs. But as you said in your piece, if you look at companies like AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson, they have not-for-profit prices on their vaccines. They're showing that they can sell doses $5, $6 each and still make a decent business out of it. Whereas Pfizer and Moderna are profiteering. They are holding the EU, rich countries to ransom. And yes, it's true, rich nations have more money than the countries of Africa, but they're also limiting supply because they're insisting on their monopoly. Pfizer has sold 93% of its vaccines to rich countries. They're not interested in selling their vaccines to Africa because they can't make the huge profits that they're making. So it's not just that the EU can afford it. Because they can afford it, they're diverting the supply of these vaccines that could be going to desperately poor countries where people are dying. The only solution to this problem is to break open the monopolies of these companies. The vaccines for Pfizer and for Moderna were paid for, the research was all paid for with taxpayer money. It was not funded by these pharmaceutical firms. So we need to open up the recipe and enable every producer on earth to produce these vaccines, which will drive down the prices to reasonable levels so we can all afford to be safe from COVID-19.
Okay, Max Lawson from Oxfam. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much again for joining us on the program.